Today I have something very special for my audience, something very special indeed. We're staying away from mainstream politics just for a change. And I'm going to introduce somebody who is a doyen of Israeli dance. And I'm speaking about Ruth Eshel. She's written a book called Dance Spreads Its Wings, which is about Israeli concert dance from 1920 to 2010. It's written in English, published by De Gruyter. Wendy Perron, the former editor-in-chief of the American Dance magazine, included the book among the notable dance books of 2021. And given the fact that Ruth spent 20 years writing this book, it very well deserves a place amongst the most notable books of the last century, one might say, especially when it comes to Israeli dance. So let's get started, Ruth. I welcome you to the show, and we'll let a little secret out very shortly that we actually do know each other well before today. But before we get into that, do you want to give us a snapshot, Ruth, of how you made your career in Israeli dance? What have been, you would say, your principal achievements?
In the late 70s, I mounted my first dance recital that was considered at the time avant-garde and the beginning of what we call alternative dance. And later, I established at University of Haifa the skesta, shoulder dancing of Ethiopian Israelis. And when I left the university, I established a beta dance company, which also of Ethiopian dancers, and it's still it's very active and very successful. And for 27 years, I've been the dance critic of Haaretz daily. And I am not any longer. And I am editor of the dance magazine Dance Today, Machol Achshav. And as you told, I just published my book, Dance Spreads Its Wings, Israeli Concert Dance.
Yes, that's quite history in dance. And you acted as an intermediary for me when you helped me establish a contact with Dege Feder.
Right.
I made a video interview in conjunction with the anniversary of Operation Solomon. So that's
right.
How we reconnected, because I was going to say, and I'm going to say now, we have a small personal connection, having met briefly in Haifa in 1978.
That's right.
And I'm just curious that you bothered to call upon me to come and do a little bit of a workshop with you at the time. Do you want to say?
That's right. It was at the Haifa Museum that we did it, only both of us, and it was terribly, terribly hot, I remember. And yes, we met once.
And you were living in Haifa, and I remember that in order to meet, I had to schlep up to Haifa to do that. And I did that, I think, a couple of times. I think you were interested because most of my listeners wouldn't know that I have a dance background, and I had just come from the hotspot of dance in New York only a little while before that. So that I think you were interested in finding out what was going on.
That's right. That's right.
Yes,
that's right.
Tell us. Let's go back to 1978 just for a moment, Ruth. And just tell us what was happening in the dance scene then. Just let's go back then.
At that stage, all the dance was concentrated mostly in the two big companies, the Batsheva and Bador, the private companies established by Baroness Batsheva de Rothschild, And all dance was concentrated there. It was very professional, but all the choreographers were invited from abroad. And there was lack of a confidence in the ability of the Israeli choreographer. So gradually spread a desert of creativity. And there were very, very few Israeli choreographers, because also the doors for these two big companies was locked before them. And there was no fringe. So we were either in the big companies or you were nobody. So what was happening that because of I was obliged to remain in Haifa. So somehow I had to find my way, and that's how came out the idea of a dance recital, which was the first one after about 15, 20 years in the country. I never knew that before there were dance recitals here in the Press State Israel. And this was the beginning of the avant-garde, because the choreographers who created especially for me some solos, they came from New York, and you were acquainted, with Elvi Nicolais and Merce Cunningham, and all this postmodern and avant-garde dance and theater. And so it was the beginning of the fringed alternative dance, which means that Israeli choreographers can be very creative and they should experiment. And there is also professional life outside the big companies.
So what happened then, just before the time we're talking, you formed your own dance theatre, right, in 1977, which continued for 12 years. So I'm going to just play a short video to show some of the work you did during that time, Ruth, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So, Ruth, we see that you've produced a book. Now, this was an enormous effort, as I was indicating. It's taken you many, many years to do this. Why did you decide to write a book covering the history of concert dance in Israel? What motivated you?
I was doing my MA degree in Montreal, Canada. At that time, my husband was there for a sabbatical. You have to choose a subject. So I was looking at the library there, and I saw that there was completely nothing about dance in Press State Israel. At the time, I knew there was something, but I didn't know what there was. And I was attracted to the fact that nothing was written about it. And I'm very much attracted to virgin fields, to be the first and to see what happens there and to reveal it like an archaeologist, who is looking for something new to dig. So that's how I started it. Out of curiosity.
Like to be an Israeli pioneer, like in the olden days.
Yes, I mean, I'm attracted to these kind of things.
But you first wrote in Hebrew, didn't you? And then it's been translated subsequently.
Actually, in 91, I wrote my first book, Lirkod im Halom, Dancing with the Dream. It was from the 20s to 64, to the establishment of Bat Sheva. And by then I knew I wanted to continue, but it took me about 20 years to do it. And the Hebrew version is 2 volumes, and it was published 3 years ago. there was a very nice launching at Suzanne Dalal Center in Tel Aviv. But then I knew that I wanted it to be translated into English.
So readers who look at your book will be puzzled a little bit that your book ends in 2010. Why didn't you continue the coverage in your book right up to the present day, which would have given it a more apparent currency?
The Hebrew book is up to 2000 because I wrote it for the Hebrew dance community, and they are very much acquainted with what happened today in Israel, but they know very little about the past, and they don't appreciate enough the past. But when I thought about public outside Israel, I thought I have to make it more updated. If you ask me, no, why not up to date? Well, I think that research needs some perspective. And you, I have to choose what is really important, what is not important, what is trendy, what will pass. And for this, I need time. So I think it's too early to write us what is going exactly now, to analyze, let's put it. You can tell, like, this and this and this happened, but in order to analyze, to understand it, you need time. You need it to look from far away. So that's why I decided to reach 2010, so I can include all the most important figures, but still not commit myself to write what is fully happening today. This needs another book, and it's not now it has to be written. We need to wait a few years.
Okay, well, maybe that will still come from your hand, a book like that, covering the last 10 or 15 years. Now, what have been some of the most successful attempts, in your opinion, by choreographers to produce an original Hebrew dance expressing a connection to the land of Israel? How important has the contribution of native choreographers been to the development of Israeli concert dance, something that's really native to the country itself, that's original?
I think that the most original period were the 20s up to the middle 30s, because at the time the pioneers wanted to build a new culture, and they were asking not only what language to speak and what to wear, but also what to dance. And there was no Israeli or Hebrew or Jewish concert dance. There was Hasidic dance, but that was religious dance. That was something else. There were some very interesting attempts like that of Baruch Haggadati, who mixed Jewish gestures with painting, avant-garde painting of the time, like Picasso. And he was also a painter himself, Haggadati. And there was Rina Nikova, who mixed her ballet with the Yemenite and Arab dance. There was a Yardena Cohen, who is the most interesting one, who studied with Mary Wigman, and she mixed expressionist European dance with Bedouin and Arab dance. And there was Dania Levin, who established her talk and speak and movement theater, and which is really a dance theater. Most of the content was very Zionist, wanted to show the link between New Israel and the ancient one.
It's quite interesting that you think a country that's trying to establish itself at its very foundation, that the dance would become a significant part of the culture so early in the piece. People would be perhaps a bit surprised that dance made such a significant start in a country that was not even on its feet yet.
Well, you are completely right, but there are always some crazy people who want to be pioneer and do something to make their life valuable and interesting. So there were few, there were not many. But later, in the mid of the 30s, when the Nazis became into power in Germany, there was a big immigration wave of Jews, and among them there were many artists, and there were some really notable dance artists, and among them the most famous one was Gertrude Kraus, and she even she was a fantastic solo dancer, but she established a dance group and connected it to the folk opera. Just imagine, there was a folk opera at the time.
So we kind of see almost as a thankful byproduct to the Second World War that there was an influx, as you're saying, of Jews who had escaped war-torn Europe and decided to come to Israel because of what was growing there. So it was an opportunity following the war. It wasn't all desolation and devastation. There was something growing already.
I wanted to add that during the World War II, dance really flourished here. It really, because all ties with the outside world were cut. So culture has to rely on local artists.
So following the war, we see a change occur. The people who are listening to this who are not probably conversant with dance may not know of the significance, but what happened in the 50s was there were people who were still doing expressionist dance, which was the mode before the war. But then following the war, we saw the advent of the Graham technique, thanks to Martha Graham. And this created a kind of a revolution, bringing all these new ideas into Israel in the 1950s.
Right. And what happened was that everybody was crazy about America. And America was Hollywood, the rich America. Martha Graham was brought to Israel by Baroness Batsheva de Rothschild, and she was very, very welcomed. And everybody thought, well, expressionist European dance, which was connected also, to the Nazis and to German. I mean, that's old-fashioned, and we should get rid of it as quickly as possible. And now we shall adapt the American dance. And as I told you, Batsheva de Rothschild established the Batsheva and the Badur Dance Company. And it was the time of professionalism, concentration of the dance in the big companies.
What happened? I'm now going into your own personal, what happened with you personally. You've written an epilogue to the chapter in your book titled Israeli Expressionist Dance Meets American Dance, which is the era that we're now talking about. And you referred to a class that you took in 1960 at the Reuben Academy of Music and Dance in Jerusalem, which today has become the Jerusalem Academy of Music and Dance. Do you want to?
That's right.
That time you stood there with in the company of course, that academy became, as I say, the Jerusalem Academy of Music and Dance, which was the first the first institution that actually gave away a degree for somebody who had studied in dance. It was given in music, I understand, but people were still qualified as dancers, and that Academy of Music and Dance still exists today. It's still going strongly.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So there is an opportunity for dancers to achieve within an academic setting, not like in your day when everybody had to basically do it on their own footing.
Right.
Yes. So I'll play a little example of some of the work from these students, just to show how students can produce dance, which is really very watchable, not just people who are considered to be professional artists. So let's go further now and look at the split up that you've brought about in your book. You've written about the development of Israeli dance in stages or sections that have defined the growth, the process of growth of Israeli dance in the Israeli context. So do you want to describe this, what the three stages are of this?
Well, I will divide it, very roughly to 4 or 5 stages. The first one was, of course, the pre-stage Israel with expressionist dance. Was up from the 20s to middle 50s, and then we have from the beginning of the 60s up to middle of the 70s. We have the Graham or the big companies, Batsheva and Bador, and that everything is concentrated there. And so then at the end of the 70s,
in that period, you're relying on foreign choreographers, yes?
Yes, and then the third stage could be the breakthrough of alternative dance, where I started, and I was followed by Rina Scheinfeld. Is a very notable. She was at the time the principal dancer of Batsheva, and then there was another track that started of alternative theater, which was influenced by Pina Bausch. And the seminal figures were like Oshra El-Kayam, Ruth Eshel, Nava Zuckerman. So there were 2 parallel alternative tracks in dance and in theater, dance theater. The third section was that, and this time, the artists tried to find their own voice, influenced by postmodern dance, by artists like Elvin Nicolais, Merce Cunningham, the ideas of Judson Church, but they selected what to take, what to adapt, and what to reject. And this was a long path from the late 70s to the beginning of the 90s to try and to create new generations of Israeli choreographers. It was a very difficult and long way. But here the government did help, because it realized finally that what is important, not to have 2, 3, 4 big companies, but also to subsidize the diversity.
So what happened to these big companies? We saw in the late 60s the evolution of Bat Dor, with basically the woman Baron von Rothschild who founded Batsheva, moved away from her baby and started another company.
Jeanette Ordman.
Yeah, with Jeanette Ordman, who was the principal who ran Bat Dor. Why did this schism develop? Why was there? Today, of course, we see Batsheva, but it's not exactly the same as the Batsheva that we saw back in the 60s and 70s. It's a different company today than it was back then. But perhaps take us to this time when there was this friction going on between Batsheva and Bat Dor.
At the beginning, Batsheva was you can say a Graham company. But later in the 17th, after Bador was established, the two companies competing each other, and gradually both of them stopped looking towards the United States and looked more towards Europe, they were very much influenced by companies like the Netherlands Dance Company and Rambert Dance Company. I mean, modern dance that is based on classical ballet. And there wasn't really a big difference between the two companies, only that the Batsheva dancers were freer and more chutzpah and more individualistic, while in Bador they were oppressed, if you can say. Their creativity as interpretation as dancer was suppressed by Jeanette Ordman. But then in the new companies were added during the early 70s. There was the Israel Ballet that was established by Hillel Markman and Berta Jampolsky. It included some of Balanchine works inside it. And later, Berta became the sole choreographer of the company, which was also problematic, but I'm not going to enter into this problem. And then there was a kibbutz dance company that was established by Judith Arnon, survivor of the Auschwitz concentration camp, and Gaton is near the Lebanon border. It was a long process to become a professional dance group, and now it is one of the main dance groups in Israel with choreographer Rami Be'er. And there was also an interesting dance company called Mama. It was established by Moshe Efrati, who was the principal dancer at Batsheva. He left the company, and the company was composed of hearing and deaf dancers.
Deaf dancers.
And in this company, deaf dancers. And in this company, he invented the vibration method, which means that he could bang with a stick on the floor, and the deaf dancer would feel the vibrations and know that relate to it as a cue where they have to do something.
Extraordinary stuff. Now, going on, let's look at the contribution, or how would you classify the contribution of the Inbal Dance Theatre to Israeli performance dance? Because of course the Inbal Dance Theatre was the first major Israeli performance company to travel overseas and perform in front of foreign audiences.
Inbal is a special case. First of all, it was established in 1948 by Sarah Levitanai. She was born in Yemen and came to Israel, and both her parents died when she was a baby. and she was raised by Ashkenazis. That means Jews who came from Europe. So she was a Yemenite with an Ashkenazi culture. When she was about 40 years old, she decided that she wants to investigate her roots. And she established and she gathered together 7 Yemenite girls who danced very well the Yemenite folklore. This was in Bal. She was very lucky that Jerome Robbins saw her at the Dahlia Festival, and he decided that this is the interesting thing, the most original thing happening at the time in Israel, and he persuaded the American Israel Foundation to subsidize the group. So the Bal was the first subsidized group that worked professionally, and it had a huge success in both. Now in Israel, it was problematic because the Yemenites said, well, this is not Yemenite dance as we know, this is not our folklore, what you are doing. And the dance community said, well, this is, they are not professional, they don't know Graham, they know they dance with flex feet. And so it was not here and not there. The 60s and the 70s were very successful years in Bal to tour the world.
And of course, the Inbal company still exists today, yes?
It does exist today, but there is nothing of it of Sarah Levit and I. It became a really, because all the choreographers that invited there are not interested to do in ballet, in Bal style and want to do contemporary dance. So Bal lost its uniqueness.
Well, these things, of course, we know change always happens. It's not always for the best. Now, I want to talk about dance notation because, of course, before we had video, dance notation was extremely important as a symbolic representation of human dance movement and form using methods such as graphic symbols and figures, path mapping, numerical systems, and letter and word notations. In particular, we saw the growth or development of the Eshkol-Wachman movement notation, which is a notation system for recording movement on paper or computer screen. And this system was created in Israel by a dance theorist, Noah Eshkol, and Avraham Wachman, who was a professor of architecture at the Technion. Do you want to explain to us a little about the Eshkol-Wachman movement notation?
Noah Eshkol started as a dancer, and she was thinking about notation, but she thought that Laba notation, which was already known at the time, at the beginning of the 50s, was too narrative, too emotional, expressed too much feeling, strong and soft. And she wanted something much more abstract. So her notation is based on an abstract spherical model that represents all possible movements of each limb in 3 dimensions in space, and it is expressed in numerical terms. So I can move the finger like that, and I can move the shoulder like that in 30, 60 degrees, and each degree can have a number, so it can be very accurate, very accurate. Now, it's quite complicated to use this notation, but it is, as I told you, it's very, very accurate. Now, there are several groups that perform dances, from dances created from the notation. One is them, the Rikudei Cheder, dance rooms, a festival, which is Rikudei Cheder. And the other one is the Rikud Neto, which means dance net, by Tirza Sapir.
That's very interesting development that people wouldn't be aware of. Now, let's look at the, perhaps you can describe for us where the present status of dance is today. I know your book is only up to 2010, but I think you're in a position to still take us to the present day. Give us an idea of who are the seminal figures in Israeli dance, who are the people that have become important in bringing dance to the public?
Well, first of all, there are three big contemporary dance companies. There's the Batsheva, there's the Kibbutzim, and recently was added Vertigo Dance Company, which has a very ecological way of looking at the world. And then there is one big classical company, the Israeli Ballet. There are 80 members in the Israeli Choreographers Association, which is a lot for about 9 million, for a country of about 9 million people. There are tens of ensembles that work all the year long, like the Jerusalem Ballet, and established by immigrants from Russia. There is the Kamea Dance Group at Be'er Sheva, and there is the Yasmin Godard group, and in Bal Pinto. So there are many. I mean, I just came yesterday from Curtain Up, and I thought, well, there is so much talent and daring in choreography today, and very, very good dancers. Now, the contents of dance changed quite dramatically in the last 10 years. And it is no more dealing with love and drama between he and her, but on personal stories of homosexuality, care for the other, and who are we? And there are many political dances, quite extreme left ideas. and going on, and because dancers felt that they have some responsibility to society. Then there are some, on the other hand, there are some fantastic dances of escapism, of like Walt Disney, you know, running to another place, wanting to forget all the problems that are around. And there are several, many new trend of dance, of religious dance, I would say, of religious contemporary dance in taking place in Jerusalem. So there's a lot of diversity of content. Also, there are many choreographers who are now interested in their roots, especially choreographers who come from families whose parents came from Arab or Islamic countries, and they go back to the roots, like Orly Portal, who was a dancer at Batsheva, now is doing her own belly dancing, which is fantastic. It's quite different from the usual belly dancing. And there is Barak Marshall, who is the son of Margalit Oved from Inbal, and he mixed together Yiddish and Yemenite and klezmers in his dance. So there are a lot of interesting mixtures going on.
There's one person you've omitted, I think, who would be probably standing very tall in the scene would be Ohad Naharin from Batsheva, who's I think a lot of people would know that name, and he developed also a style of movement called Gaga, which is extremely prominent even today.
That's right. Before Ohad became a director of Batsheva, I think it was in 1990. Batsheva was, as I told you before, it was like Bado. There were two good companies, but not extremely interesting ones. And Ohad Naharin changed completely in the past it was a repertory dance company. Now it is completely linked with his name and his Gaga that created a new way of moving in a new language of movement. He doesn't like to call it himself as an inventor of a movement language, so he said it's just Gaga.
Well, as the two of us know, it's much more than that.
We know it's much more than that.
Yeah, we know.
The many years that I'm dancing and especially working with other people as a choreographer. A lot of it is to do with delicacy, with small gestures, and still being able to punch. It's about thinking of movement as something that can heal. It's about, as I said before, it's about giving the dancers a sense that they can go beyond familiar limits on a daily basis. It's about the power of imagination. We work without mirrors. Mirrors are forbidden. But still, it's a lot about form and the clarity of form. It doesn't come from looking at yourself, but really sensing where you are in space and the distance of your body parts from each other and from your colleagues and from the universe. Many times even though I can see that Gaga is very meaningful to the dancers, but what is really meaningful to me even more will be what they already possess. Gaga is not just about making you a better athlete or lift your legs higher or jump higher. It's not about that. It's about a range, and it's about listening to something that is beyond the athletic side of a dancer. It is also that, but something about the soul, about the connection between your demons, fantasy, passion, and actually longevity, that you actually learn to do more with less, that you can grow old and you can still produce magnificent moments.
Now, there have been a number of different styles of dance that have been manifest in Israeli society. For example, we can speak of ethnic dance. We've spoken about Inbal. We can talk about ballet. We can talk about modern dance. What has been the receptivity to these different forms of dance by audiences over time?
From the beginning, modern dance was accepted and embraced, because then the classical ballet was rejected. It didn't fit the ideology of the pioneers wanting to create a social and a just society. And the ballet was associated with stage, with social differences. Dance was very popular. This dance, exposition dance, was very popular, and the audience understood it. As to the American dance, it was embraced, but it wasn't really very much understood. It was hard to understand Graham dance with her Greek philosophies. But the audience appreciated the professionalism of the companies and the famous names who came from abroad. The alternative dance, it took time, but today, to be appreciated by the audience. But today there is a balance between alternative movement dance and the big companies, and both are appreciated and received by the public, by the audience, in the same way. I mean, I don't think that there is less audience for Inbal Pinto than for the Kibbutz Dance Company.
Okay.
And so, I mean, both are very much appreciated. And sometimes I would say the more interesting things happened in the fringe. Well, Ohad Narin is something special. He is really a genius in his field.
Yes.
And there's a lot of Spanish dance of flamenco, which was brought by Silvia Doran, an immigrant, Jewish immigrant who came to Israel. There is a lot of buto, and there are quite in the last decade there are quite several Arab Israeli or Palestinian Israelis, not only dancers but choreographers. In the 80s, there were a few Palestinian dancers who danced with the Inbal Dance Company, the Kibbutz Dance Company. And now there are also several dance creators like Adi Butrus, Rabbi Amurkus, Sahar Demoni, Ishaden Abul Asal. What is interesting is that they are all Christians, because I think that the Christians are more open to dance than the Muslims. But then it's also interesting that they agree and even want today to be part of the Israel dance scene, because for many years they boycotted it. They were regarded as traitors if they would go and join a Israeli dance company. But I think that's at least. But they do really want to be part, I think, of the Israeli society without losing their national identity. So you can see them in all the big dance festivals in Israel.
Yeah, the dominant dance form they've introduced into Israeli dance is the debka, the form of.
Well, the debka is a folklore, an Arabic folklore dance, and each section of the Arab world has its own interpretation of the debka. The debka was very popular between 48 and even today. It's popular because it reflects their nationality. But if before there was only the debka, now there are, as I told you, there are several Arab Palestinians artists of their own, and they are quite respected.
Soon you will move, you'll get ready, you'll prepare yourself to applaud.
Ruth, I wanted to ask you, has Israeli concert dance or its exponents had a significant effect on the world stage? Of course, it's important for Israeli dance to develop for its own people, its own choreographers, its own audience. But has Israeli dance really made a significant contribution on the world stage? And where is Israeli dance heading today? What are some emerging trends, would you say?
It's hard for me to say, you know.
I don't want to give you an easy question.
I know that Gaga in Batsheva is very, very popular, and Sharon Eyal, who was the muse of Ohad Narin, has her own dance company now, and she's fantastic, by the way. Her name is Sharon Eyal, and she is also very successful in the world. But I think that the Gaga had made something different, has contributed to the technique in the dance movement. As to the rest, it's hard to say. I know the dance in Israel is very popular, and every year there is what we have in international exposure, Suzanne Dalan centers, and tens of buyers from all over the world come, and they take, and happily that they invite those companies, because Israel can't have so much activity of dance, and they must be invited abroad to perform. But what I can say, I can quote Judith Wynn Ingberg, who is an expert of who knows very well Israeli dance and is from United States. And to hear what she thinks about Israeli dance, she comes to see the Israeli dance and dance exposure, and she says, Israel dance is diverse, showing enormous imaginations at work, some with dystopian views of the world, others evolving from Israel's different ethnic backgrounds, and others with unexpected views of aging or sensuality. Most were danced by fabulous performers, all to impart something of Israel for the guests' various home country audiences. But I think it's easier for her to see from abroad than for me who is inside it. And as to your question, where it is heading, you know, it's hard to tell. Probably it's heading something, changing direction, because from the beginning of the 2000 to now, till now, there hasn't been a very big shift. I mean, there are more dancers, but more choreographies, but not something different really evolved from what I explained before. And from my research, I saw that about every 20 years there is a new stage coming on. What it is, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's going more to using more voice, more talk inside the dance. At the same time, being very technical and also talking at the same time. I don't know. I don't know. But what I do, the corona, the COVID-19 really hit very strong the dancing here. And for half a year, there was nothing going on. And now there's a birth of creativity. And this year in international exposure, the buyers didn't come from abroad, but they were invited to see the works by Zoom. So I don't know how many will be invited abroad. And I don't know how much money the government will be able to subsidize dance. By the way, that dance is the least expensive, least expensive. Get the least expensive, subsidized from all the other arts. So I don't know, and the future is not. It's quite worrying, I would say. You know, there's no end to the conflict with the Israeli-Arabic Palestinian conflict. Now there's the Iran thing, and well, I don't know.
Well, that's,
but at least,
you're kind of talking here about a shadow over us.
But at least, I mean, there's a lot of dance, and a lot of talent. So as I told you, that's one of the reasons I didn't write the book up to 2020, because we have to wait.
You have to wait, yeah, to see how the sprouts grow from the ground and what they develop into. I can understand.
That's right. That's right.
It's been really extraordinary having this conversation with you. I hope that our audience that we've had that came along with us on this journey today can appreciate it, because we have gone into a subject which is not really a common language for a lot of people. I think dance is still seen to be a bit of a Cinderella of the performing arts. It's not like classical music or classical ballet, or it's not really mainstream. Even though it might be popular, it's still not been adopted within the mindset, I think, of the general population. At least in Australia, that's the case.
Can I add something?
Go ahead, yes.
I wanted to say that when we are going to concerts, classical music concerts, and all the heads are, when we see, they're white, with white hair. Everything is white hair. Also in theater, most are, you see, white hair. When you go to dance performance, it's all
young,
dark and young people. So you can feel it is an art that is living and it's breathing. It's full of energy. So at least in Israel.
That sounds great. Really sounds great. Thank you very much, Ruth, for talking to us today. Been really fascinating to hear what you've done in dance yourself, and what you have been able to inform us about what has occurred within the field of dance over 90 years. Extraordinary effort of yours. I congratulate you, Ruth, on what you've done.
Thank you.
I was a main dancer there, but Sheva wanted to show the world that
fucked up